The date is 7th August 1943. A German aircraft mechanic at Villacoublay airfield outside Paris kneels beside a Focke-Wulf FW-190 fighter performing routine maintenance on the engine. He unscrews the oil filler cap, checks the dipstick, and reaches for a tin of lubricating oil from the maintenance stores. The oil appears entirely normal as he pours it into the engine, dark and viscous, flowing smoothly from the container. He replaces the cap, wipes his hands, and signs off the maintenance log. 3 days later, the same aircraft returns from a sortie over the channel with its engine seized solid, cylinders scored beyond repair, the entire power plant destroyed from within. The pilot barely made it back across the coast. When German engineers disassemble the engine, they find the internal surfaces catastrophically damaged, covered in microscopic gouges and scratches, as though someone had introduced fine grinding compound directly into the lubrication system, which is precisely what had happened. The oil tin the mechanic used contained not just oil, but a carefully calculated measure of carborundum powder, silicon carbide particles so fine they passed through filters, so hard they abraded hardened steel, and so thoroughly mixed with genuine lubricating oil that detection was virtually impossible until the damage was already done. This was not sabotage in any conventional sense. No explosion, no fire, no immediate catastrophe. Instead, it was something far more insidious. A weapon that turned the Germans' own maintenance procedures against them, that transformed routine care into mechanical suicide, that made every tin of oil, every drum of grease, every container of hydraulic fluid a potential instrument of destruction. The concept was brilliantly, ruthlessly simple, and it came from the same minds that had created exploding coal and deceptive devices at Station 15. By 1942, the Special Operations Executive faced a persistent challenge with sabotage operations across occupied Europe. Conventional attacks on German equipment required resistance fighters to gain physical access to aircraft, vehicles, and machinery, then inflict obvious damage that would be immediately noticed and repaired. A slashed tire could be replaced within minutes. A cut fuel line revealed itself instantly. Explosives destroyed equipment spectacularly, but also triggered immediate investigations, harsh reprisals, and heightened security that made subsequent operations nearly impossible. The Gestapo had become exceptionally skilled at tracking sabotage patterns, infiltrating resistance networks, and executing anyone suspected of involvement. In France alone, German security forces had executed over 1,500 resistance members by the end of 1942, with many more imprisoned or sent to concentration camps. The mathematics of conventional sabotage simply did not favor the Allies. Each act of obvious destruction might disable one aircraft or vehicle, but would cost the resistance network dearly in terms of security, operational capability, and human life. The Germans, meanwhile, possessed vast industrial resources and could replace damaged equipment far faster than resistance fighters could destroy it. The Luftwaffe operated over 2,000 aircraft from French airfields alone, with full maintenance facilities and spare parts readily available. What the SOE needed was a form of sabotage that was undetectable at the point of application, that would not trigger immediate security responses, that would spread uncertainty and paranoia rather than provoking focused retaliation, and that could be deployed by minimally trained operatives with little risk of capture. The damage needed to be delayed, subtle enough to appear as mechanical failure rather than deliberate sabotage, yet severe enough to genuinely impair German military capability. It seemed an impossible set of requirements. How could you sabotage equipment in a way that was both undetectable and effective? How could you ensure the damage occurred at the right time and in the right place? How could you spread this form of sabotage widely enough to matter without requiring an army of trained agents? The answer, when it emerged, would rely not on sophisticated engineering, but on exploiting a fundamental truth about mechanical systems. They depend entirely on lubrication, and contaminated lubricant destroys machinery with absolute reliability. The solution came from Station 15's technical staff, working in collaboration with chemical specialists at the Ministry of Supply's research facilities. The lead chemist was Dr. Hugh Sinclair, who had previously worked on petroleum products for Shell, and the operational coordinator was Major Christopher Clutton, an engineer who understood both German maintenance procedures and the practical limitations of resistance operations. Their insight was elegantly straightforward. German military equipment, like all machinery, required constant lubrication. Engine oil, gear grease, hydraulic fluid, and cooling system additives move through supply chains from refineries to depots to frontline maintenance units. If abrasive compounds could be introduced into these lubricants in concentrations high enough to cause damage, but low enough to avoid immediate detection, the Germans would unknowingly destroy their own equipment during routine maintenance. The abrasive agent selected was carborundum, silicon carbide particles produced synthetically and used industrially as grinding compound. The material had a Mohs hardness of approximately 9.5, making it harder than virtually any metal used in engine construction except tungsten carbide. Particles in the range of 5 to 20 microns proved optimal, large enough to cause rapid damage but small enough to remain suspended in oil and pass through coarse filters. The preparation involved mixing measured quantities of carborundum powder with genuine lubricating oil or grease in ratios that varied depending on the application. For engine oil, a concentration of approximately 2% by weight proved devastatingly effective. At this level, the contaminated oil appeared entirely normal to visual inspection, felt normal to the touch, and would pass cursory quality checks. The particles only revealed themselves when the oil circulated through an engine under operating pressure and temperature, at which point the abrasive action began grinding away at cylinder walls, bearings, piston rings, and valve stems. The beauty of the system lay in its delayed action. An engine treated with abrasive oil might run normally for several hours or even days, depending on operating conditions. During this time, microscopic damage accumulated steadily. Cylinder walls developed scored surfaces that allowed combustion gases to blow past piston rings. Bearings wore unevenly, introducing vibration and stress. Eventually, the accumulated damage reached a critical threshold, and the engine failed catastrophically. To German mechanics, the failure pattern resembled accelerated wear or poor quality materials rather than sabotage. Station 15 began producing contaminated lubricants in early 1943, using laboratory facilities at their Stevenage location for initial preparation. The actual mixing occurred in controlled conditions using precision scales to ensure consistent contamination levels. Finished products were packaged in containers identical to standard German military-issue tins, drums, and bottles, complete with authentic-looking labels and lot numbers. Production volumes remain classified, but declassified SOE records reference shipments containing hundreds of contaminated containers distributed across multiple operations. Deployment began in spring 1943, focused initially on French and Belgian resistance networks with access to Luftwaffe airfields and Wehrmacht motor pools. The contaminated lubricants were supplied with specific instructions. They were to be substituted for genuine products in German stores, either by swapping containers directly or by infiltrating them into supply chains through sympathetic workers in captured refineries or distribution depots. One documented operation involved a French resistance cell near Tours that had recruited a worker in the Luftwaffe's petroleum stores. Over a period of 3 months in mid-1943, this individual systematically swapped approximately 40 tins of contaminated engine oil for genuine stock. The contaminated tins were then issued to maintenance crews servicing FW-190 and BF-109 fighters. German records from the period, captured after the war, show a spike in unexplained engine failures at WWII and Tours airfields during August and September 1943. With maintenance reports describing unusual wear patterns and premature component failure. In Belgium, resistance operatives introduced contaminated gear grease into Wehrmacht vehicle maintenance facilities near Brussels. The grease, used in differential and transmission servicing, caused gradual but irreversible damage to lorries and armored cars. German logistics reports from autumn 1943 reference increasing vehicle breakdowns and the need to divert scarce replacement parts to units that should not have required such extensive maintenance. The psychological impact extended beyond the material damage. Once German authorities recognized that lubricants could be weaponized, trust in supply chains evaporated. Maintenance units received orders to test all lubricants before use, a process that consumed time and resources. Some facilities implemented policies requiring lubricants to be sourced only from sealed containers delivered directly from Germany, dramatically complicating logistics in occupied territories where local supplies had previously supplemented German stocks. If you are finding this interesting, a quick subscribe helps more than you know. The Germans attempted their own versions of abrasive sabotage, primarily targeting Soviet equipment on the Eastern Front, but their efforts suffered from poor quality control and inadequate distribution networks. German abrasive compounds often used ground glass or metal filings rather than carborundum, producing inconsistent results and greater visibility in the contaminated lubricants. The Abwehr's Sabotage division produced guidelines for contaminating enemy lubricants, but these were distributed primarily to agents operating behind Soviet lines rather than being deployed systematically in the West, where Allied supply chains proved far more resistant to infiltration. American forces developed similar abrasive sabotage capabilities through the Office of Strategic Services, though OSS operatives often used British-supplied contaminated lubricants rather than producing their own. American technical reports from 1944 acknowledge Station 15's superior formulation and packaging, particularly the attention to detail in replicating German military specifications for container markings and labeling. The British approach differed fundamentally in its emphasis on subtlety and delayed effect. Where German and even some American sabotage concepts favored immediate, obvious destruction, Station 15's abrasive program aimed to create uncertainty and waste German resources on investigation and prevention. A destroyed engine that appeared to have failed due to poor maintenance or defective materials required investigation, replacement parts, and potentially the grounding of similar equipment pending inspection. The cumulative drain on German logistics and morale exceeded the simple arithmetic of machines destroyed. Assessing the actual impact of abrasive sabotage requires acknowledging substantial gaps in documentation. Resistance operations were rarely recorded in detail. Contaminated lubricants were designed to create damage indistinguishable from mechanical failure, and German maintenance records seldom attributed unexplained breakdowns to potential sabotage unless evidence was overwhelming. Conservative estimates based on declassified SOE distribution records suggest several thousand contaminated containers reached resistance networks, though the proportion actually deployed versus captured or lost remains unknown. Post-war analysis of Luftwaffe maintenance records shows statistically significant increases in engine failures at certain airfields during periods corresponding to known abrasive lubricant deployments, though definitively linking specific failures to sabotage remains impossible. The broader impact operated on psychological and logistical levels. German security directives from 1943 and 1944 show increasing paranoia about supply chain integrity, with orders requiring elaborate testing and verification procedures that consumed resources and slowed operations. Maintenance units hoarded sealed containers delivered directly from Germany rather than using locally available stocks, complicating logistics and creating artificial shortages. The concept of weaponized lubricants influenced post-war sabotage doctrine significantly. Cold War-era special forces maintained capabilities for abrasive contamination, though specific details remain classified. The principle that everyday consumables could be turned into weapons became a foundational element of unconventional warfare training. Surviving examples of Station 15's contaminated lubricant containers exist in the Imperial War Museum's collection, stored in controlled conditions with their deadly contents neutralized. The tins appear utterly unremarkable, their authentic German military markings and labels testament to the meticulous craft that went into creating them. That German mechanic at WWII airfield, pouring oil into a fighter engine on a warm August morning in 1943, had no reason to question the container in his hands. It bore the correct markings, came from the authorized stores, and contained oil that looked, smelled, and felt exactly as it should. Every procedure was followed correctly, every regulation observed, every step of the maintenance checklist completed precisely as trained. And yet, within that ordinary tin, mixed invisibly with genuine lubricating oil, were millions of microscopic particles harder than the steel they would destroy, particles that would circulate through the engine's arteries like a slow-acting mechanical poison. This was the terrible genius of abrasive sabotage. It required no dramatic action, no heroic raid, no spectacular explosion. It simply took something essential, something trusted, something used every single day, and corrupted it so subtly that the corruption remained invisible until the damage was irreversible. Station 15 understood that the most effective sabotage does not always announce itself with fire and destruction. Sometimes it whispers in the grinding of contaminated bearings, in the scoring of cylinder walls, in the gradual accumulation of damage that transforms routine maintenance into mechanical suicide. The secret British idea that made German weapons destroy themselves was not really about the weapons at all. It was about trust, about the invisible dependencies that keep complex systems functioning, about the profound vulnerability that exists in every supply chain, every container, every moment when someone assumes that what they are using is what it appears to be. And in exploiting that vulnerability with such calculated precision, Britain proved that sometimes the quietest weapons cut deepest.